opposition. The Prime Minister says inaccurate weather reports can cause disruption in many sectors and result in economic losses. The Syrian opposition is awaiting a response to its demand from the United Nations before joining peace negotiations due to start on Friday. And 23 are killed in clashes between security forces and rebels in southeast Turkey. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour urged weather forecasters to ensure their reports are as accurate and credible as possible. He said inaccurate forecasts would cost the national economy huge losses and cause disruption in sectors whose work largely depends on weather predictions. He said during a visit to the Jordan Meteorological Department that inaccurate weather forecasts would entail incorrect decisions and cause chaos in a host of sectors, including trade, industry, agriculture, transport, tourism, university exams, and other economic losses incurred by disruption or delays. The Prime Minister said his government would provide modern, high-tech equipment and expertise to the Meteorology Department, urging intense and continued training programs for staff outside the country to keep up to date with international advancements in the field. Jordan scored 53 points in Transparency International's TI Corporation Perception Index CPI 2015. This placed the kingdom the third least corrupt in the Middle East, outranked by Qatar and the United Arab Emirates. The kingdom's ranking dropped to 53rd among the 168 index countries, compared to 49th in 2014, according to a statement by the TI. Denmark scored 91 in the CPI and tied for the first place. North Korea and Somalia, meanwhile, clung to the bottom rung in the index. The Standing Committee of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe has named Jordan as a partner for democracy. 114 of the 115 Assembly members had voted for Jordan's membership, the first such massive vote for a foreign country. Addressing the session in Strasbourg yesterday, Lower House Speaker Atif Tarawne said the kingdom is proud of this partnership, which it will continue to strengthen. He reviewed political reforms Jordan had undertaken and the passage of political parties, decentralization, and municipalities legislation, adding that the elections draft law is on the agenda of the kingdom's parliament. Tarawne also urged the international community to find a solution to the Palestinian issue and warned against Israeli arbitrary measures against the Palestinians, as well as its settlement policy and violation of holy places in Jerusalem. He also told the European lawmakers that Jordan was the first country to raise the alarm of the danger of terrorism and the need to combat extremism that knows no religion or borders.
Our Assembly has just decided to grant the status of partner for democracy to the Parliament of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. Therefore, we congratulate and we welcome you and your colleagues today, not only as our guests of honor, but also as our partners. So welcome to this house of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law, which from now on is also your house, your home. Dear speakers, dear colleagues from the Parliament of Jordan, I would like to congratulate the people of Jordan and the authorities of your country, and first and foremost, His Majesty King Abdullah II, for their genuine desire and commitment to embark on a process of fundamental reforms. This is especially crucial given the complex regional situation.
Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Gennady Gatilov announced that Syrian Foreign Minister Walid al-Muallim will head the government's delegation to peace talks with the opposition later this week. Preparations for the latest efforts to end Syria's 5-year civil war had been complicated, mainly over a dispute on who should represent the opposition. The United Nations Special Envoy to Syria, Staffan de Mistura, had sent out invitations to the talks, which are due to begin in Geneva on Friday. Here's more.
Diplomacy is stepped up ahead of Friday's schedule for the start of Syrian peace talks. The Syrian government has already agreed to join the talks that UN envoy Staffan de Mistura hopes to convene in an indirect format in Geneva with the aim of ending the 5-year-old war. But the Syrian opposition is awaiting a response to its demands from the United Nations before deciding whether to attend. France's foreign minister said Syrian Kurdish officials will not be invited to the Geneva round, where negotiations for the opposition will be led by an opposition group. Laura Fabius said de Mistura told him the Kurdish PYD party would not attend the talks. The co-leader for the Syrian Democratic Council, Haytham Manna, said he would not take part unless 2 Kurdish leaders were also invited. Manna is not part of the main opposition delegation, which was formed at a meeting in Saudi Arabia, and has yet to say if it will take part in the peace talks.
I received an invitation, and many of my friends also, and my colleagues in the Syrian Democratic Council. But I think that it's not the good way to have a Syrian delegation. They propose now to us a delegation really which we can call Russian delegation. And I'm not ready to be a member of a Russian delegation. We have the right to have our own delegation.
Manna said he hoped negotiating parties would have a change of heart in the coming days.
We have one day, and tomorrow perhaps also, to negotiate all of these things with Russian, Americans, and the Mistura staff. We'll see if they accept our opinion, our view, to have really a strong and representative delegation. We are ready to go.
The Syrian opposition is demanding, among other things, a halt to attacks on civilian areas before any negotiations begin. Syrian refugees say they have very low expectations for the upcoming Geneva III negotiations. These Syrians at the Zaatari refugee camp here in Jordan expressed little hope that the situation in their war-torn country would change anytime soon. Hiba Al-Atoum for the News at 10.
Border guards received 59 Syrian refugees who crossed from the war-torn country in the past 24 hours. A Jordan Armed Forces Arab Army source said troops escorted the refugees, provided them with the necessary aid, and transferred them to refugee camps. The source said Royal Medical Services personnel treated the sick refugees. Turkish security forces killed 20 Kurdish militants in the southeast of the country, while a rebel attack left 3 Turkish soldiers dead. The violence came as authorities widened a curfew in the mainly Kurdish region's largest city of Diyarbakir. The army said 11 Kurdistan Workers' Party members died in the town of Cizre near the Syrian border and 9 more in the Sur district. It said 3 soldiers were killed in a militant attack in Sur, where security sources said militants opened fire with rifles and a rocket launcher. The district governor's office said the curfew was extended to 5 other districts so that security forces could remove barricades and explosive devices and fill in ditches set up by the militants. Residents were asked to leave their homes as the curfew was widened. Tunisia's parliament debated the civil unrest after a week of protests and riots over jobs. The parliament was set to meet to discuss a 5-year government strategy. However, opposition members of parliament protested and questioned the government over the recent unrest. The president of the parliament said employment, or rather the lack of it, was the key of the problems, while MPs intervened to criticize corruption in the administration and the lack of efficiency of government decisions. Tunisian Prime Minister Habib Assid blamed what he called terrorists, saying they had tried to take advantage of the social unrest to destabilize the country. Thousands of young men took to the streets in Qasrain last week after an unemployed man committed suicide when he was refused a job. Iran's President Hassan Rouhani said on his arrival in Paris that a new chapter has begun in Tehran's relations with the European Union after the lifting of sanctions on his country. Rouhani was earlier in Rome, where he said Iran could have better relations with the United States, but it is up to Washington to change its stance towards Tehran. Rouhani said Washington and Tehran need to set aside hostilities. Iran is looking to rebuild its relations with the West about 2 weeks after financial sanctions were rolled back following the implementation of its nuclear deal with world powers. Qatar's Emir announced a cabinet reshuffle, replacing his foreign minister and merging some portfolios. It was Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani's first major shuffle since taking power in 2013. 7 ministerial changes were announced by the official Qatar news agency. Denmark's parliament passed measures aimed at deterring refugees from seeking asylum despite protests from international human rights organizations. The Italian Coast Guard, meanwhile, said 124 migrants were rescued from a rubber boat in the Mediterranean. The arrivals came as the European Union inched closer to accepting that its Schengen zone of passport-free travel may be suspended if it cannot curb the number of asylum seekers. This report has the details.
A rescue mission in the Mediterranean, part of a multi-day operation by the Italian Coast Guard that saved the lives of more than 1,200 people. It's a snapshot as Europe faces a harsh test in the struggle to find common cause on migration. In Sweden, police stand outside an asylum center where an employee was allegedly stabbed to death by a 15-year-old refugee. Sweden's Prime Minister Stefan Löfven says there are no simple answers.
Many of those who come here to Sweden have had traumatic experiences, and there are no simple answers as to how this should be dealt with. But there are some important principles that apply.
Sweden reversed its open-door immigration policy late last year, introducing border controls and ID checks to stem the flow of asylum seekers. Similar scenes along Germany's border with Austria. Border controls reintroduced last autumn that were supposed to be temporary. But with Germany absorbing more than 1 million refugees, Chancellor Angela Merkel is under pressure.
We must find a level of balance, and we should not become pessimistic too quickly. I still believe that we can manage it. Of course, we must significantly reduce the number of refugees, and we are working on that. But those who are already here should get to know the Germany that has shown itself to be a place where many people are there for others.
The EU is expected to reassess the refugee crisis in mid-February, a crisis with no easy answers and so many lives at stake.
Amid the migrant crisis, the European Union's executive said Greece could face new border controls with other states of the free travel Schengen zone in May. European Commission Vice President for the Euro, Valdis Dombrovskis, urged Athens to fix deficiencies in its management of the area's external frontier. He said Greece had more improvements in its border controls, but there were not enough, and the EU would continue to work to help Athens tighten its procedures.
The report notably finds that there is no effective identification and registration of irregular migrants, and that fingerprints are not being systematically entered in the system, and travel documents are not being systematically checked for the authenticity or against crucial security databases such as SIS, Interpol, and national databases.
The Brazilian government will launch a campaign to eradicate Zika-carrying mosquitoes in a bid to contain an outbreak of the virus. The Zika virus has been linked to birth defects across the country. To date, Brazil has registered close to 4,000 suspected cases, including 49 deaths. Among these, 230 have been confirmed to be related to the virus. 282 have been temporarily excluded. The others remain under investigation. Here's more.
These are the frontline fighters in Brazil's battle against the rapid spread of the Zika virus. They're fumigating a slum where several cases of the virus have been reported. Zika is a mosquito-borne virus linked to an alarming surge in infants born with serious brain deformations. Glyce Kelly's daughter, Maria Giovanna, is one of them. She was diagnosed with microencephaly after her mother was infected with Zika while pregnant. Some 4,000 suspected cases of microencephaly have been reported in Brazil since October, compared to 150 cases in all of 2014. In addition to fumigating, health officials have launched a campaign to educate people on how to prevent mosquito breeding in their homes.
Technically, we say the pathogenicity of the virus in the brain tissues might be the irrefutable proof, but all the evidence is showing that direction. And of course, all the public health response to that needs to go very strongly orientated to the control of the mosquito.
Zika is transmitted by the same mosquito that transmits diseases like dengue and chikungunya. There is no vaccine or treatment for it. Brazil is trying to get the epidemic under control before the country hosts the Olympic Games in Rio de Janeiro in August.
Italian fashion heavyweight Giorgio Armani brought a delicate touch to his Spring-Summer 2016 haute couture collection, which he presented in Paris. The 81-year-old designer used mauve throughout the collection, coloring light jackets, shorts, pants, dresses, and evening gowns. To the slow beat of the music, models showcased the soft and silky outfits that were delicately decorated with ruffles, jewels, and remained loose around the body, giving the illusion of constant movement. Armani's collection is a play on textures, lengths, and volume, all the while remaining natural with various shades of mauve and pink.
Bring us back home. Shining a little light.
Milos Raonic stormed past Gilles Monfil 6-3, 3-6, 6-3, 6-4 to reach the semi-finals of the Australian Open for the first time. The 25-year-old, unbeaten this year, negated the Frenchman's mobility with his powerful serve and fierce forehands to become the first Canadian man to reach the last four at Melbourne Park. The 13th seed, a former semi-finalist at Wimbledon, secured a single break to win the first and third sets, and another in the fourth was enough for victory. Raonic hit his 47th winner after 2 hours and 7 minutes to set up a last four meeting with British seed Andy Murray on Friday. We stay in Australia when earlier Britain's Andy Murray overcame David Ferrer 6-3, 6-7, 6-2, 6-3 in an epic quarterfinal tussle to reach the last four of the Australian Open for the sixth time. With the win, Britain now has two representatives in the semi-finals of a Grand Slam for the first time since 1977. The world number two was forced to scrap for almost every point, but finally subdued the Spanish ace seed after 3 hours and 20 minutes of grueling baseline tennis. And finally, a look at the weather. The cold conditions will begin to stabilize tonight. However, it will continue to be very cold, with frost expected in most regions across the kingdom, as well as in the central and northern Jordan Valley. Tomorrow, it will be cold and cloudy in general, with northeasterly light to moderate winds. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect chilly conditions with northerly moderate winds and choppy seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. To end the news, here's a reminder of our top stories. The Prime Minister says inaccurate weather reports can cause disruptions in many sectors and result in economic losses. The Syrian opposition is awaiting a response to its demands from the United Nations before joining peace negotiations due to start on Friday. And 23 are killed in clashes between security forces and rebels in southeast Turkey. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Nancy Khair. Thank you for watching and have a good night.